Hello BookTube, my name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. I've got no rhythm. It's been a couple of weeks because I've had lots of things on, so I'm going to catch up today with a bunch of stuff. Give you some news, and I've got some videos of things that I've done in the last couple of weeks to show you, not at all book related. Then I have an article from The Guardian that I want to talk through because it was surprisingly on the nose, and then I'll catch up with the books that I've read since we last spoke. So what's going on here is you probably notice if you watch the news that we have a new Prime Minister after 12 years. New Prime Minister is not a significant improvement on the old Prime Minister, but the coalition that is now sitting in government is, I hope, an improvement. Certainly, we have a coalition made up of 8 different parties. Yes, 8 different parties comprising 61 seats out of 120-seat parliament. So they made it to 61 seats, but they had to cobble together 8 different parties to do so. That means that the party that the current Prime Minister represents has, I think, 6 or 7 seats out of 120 in the whole of it, and yet he's Prime Minister. It's quite absurd, but that's the nature of our extreme democracy. So while I'm not a big fan of the Prime Minister, one of the parties that is in the coalition is actually the party that I voted for. So I take responsibility even when my party isn't in government, because I think as a member of the electorate you have to. But I guess I have more responsibility for this government than the last few, seeing as the people that I voted for are actually in it. We'll see. One tries to be optimistic that things will improve. One of the things that you might not know about the new Prime Minister is that he lives about 150 yards away, literally down the end of the street. And I've walked past his house a number of times. Before he was Prime Minister, I would occasionally bump into him in the local mini market. I found out today, I didn't know this at all, that my daughter babysat for them on a couple of occasions. Then one of her good friends became their sort of full-time babysitter. So that's meant years ago when she was 14, she would have babysat for them. And as I say, he lives right there, and so far, to the consternation of my local community, he has not moved into the official Prime Minister's residence, which is in Jerusalem, about an hour's drive away. One of the reasons he hasn't moved into the Prime Minister's residence is because the previous Prime Minister has refused to move out. I don't know if that sounds familiar to any of my American viewers. An official losing an election and deciding that he would rather not give up his post. My understanding is that he is going to move out of the Prime Minister's residence, but the new Prime Minister has suggested that he's not going to move in and he will stay locally here. His kids are in school here, his wife is here and her work is here, and he's considering staying, as I say, about 150 yards away from where I am now. Now, this wouldn't bother me at all, except the Secret Service has closed off the street around his house. I have several friends who live within the area that is closed off. Now, if I want to visit them, they have to alert the Secret Service before I can walk into their homes, places where I would normally freely walk. It would be on the way of walking to synagogue. I don't usually go that way, but plenty of people do. So it's been a little awkward. In addition, not everybody, the nature of our democracy is that usually half the country isn't in favour of whoever wins, and there have been some protests, and where these protests used to take place outside the actual Prime Minister's residence in Jerusalem, now they're taking place in my neighbourhood. And most nights they stop before 11 o'clock because then the police shut it down, but most nights now there are people marching around with bullhorns, waving flags, expressing their opposition to the current Prime Minister. We think, I don't have any evidence of this, that most of them are sort of paid provocateurs by Netanyahu's the Likud party, unhappy with the way that Bennett has achieved his position, but they're out there in force. And I have some video of the view from this window right here, looking out onto the street. I have some video now of the protests that go on a fairly regular basis outside my window at night. I'll show you the video now. So that was one thing that's going on. I was out for dinner tonight with my mother-in-law for her birthday, so we didn't hear anything this side of town. Maybe it's quieting down. It's been a couple of weeks now, but really living in the middle of things. Other things that went on. So last week had a very busy week. So we had a wedding that we went to that was in Jerusalem, and on the way home for the wedding I went to a massive party. Yeah, because things in Israel for a very short amount of time were gloriously free. No masks inside. Everyone was gathering. It was a beautiful time. During this small window, we had a massive party at work. The company I work for is a big global international company, and they were celebrating 30 years since they opened their offices in Israel, and we had a massive party to celebrate. So I went from the wedding, got to this party about 11 o'clock at night, which is, I thought was pretty cool to turn up to a party 11 o'clock at night, but still going strong. And on stage they had live performances, live lip-synced performances by a huge number, I think 10 or 11, 12 different top Israeli pop artists, some of which I vaguely recognised the sounds that I might have heard on the radio, but I didn't really know who anybody was. And I was doing all evening was taking pictures of the stage, texting one of my children saying, should I know who this person is? And they would text me back who they thought it was, who they knew it was. So that was would have been much cooler if I'd actually been able to identify some of these. There was one point where I thought the DJ was playing, if any of you are Eurovision fans, Israel's entry this year. The same person was supposed to enter last year and entered this year. The song from last year to the contest that never happened was a great song called Feke Libi by Edna Lena, and the song came on and everyone was singing and dancing to it, and it was great. And only afterwards I realised, oh, actually, that was Edna Lena on stage who was singing it. Anyway, so that's how useless I am, these things. But I've got some video of the party, and you can see what it's like when things are good and we can all go out and have a party. So that was a very busy night. 2 days later, there was another party at work, a different kind of party, because we opened a new building, and so they were invited us in small groups. It's the end of the financial year, so I think basically, having not been able to do anything with our, the budgets they have for keeping all the employees happy, they rammed it all in before the end of June. So we had another party. They opened up a new office, on the roof there was a whole other live artist on stage, who again I didn't know, frantically texting my kids, who's this? Texting me back, got it. And I've got some video of that rooftop party, which was 2 days later. I think that was a Tuesday early evening, and just as the sun's going down over the sea, so that's quite pretty. And here's that. So at the end of that busy week, we had Friday night dinner here. So everyone was, I'd been away, my wife was away, and then everyone was here. So my mum is still here, and she was with us that Friday night, and she stayed with my brother this week, and she's back here now, but this is last Friday night. We had for dinner my mum, my brother came with his wife and their kids, and all of my kids were home. So that is my eldest son came with his wife. My second son lives in Jerusalem, was with us, and brought his girlfriend, and my daughter, who lives at home, for the first time, her boyfriend came and had dinner with us. So they've been dating for about 3 or 4 months. He's a perfectly charming chap, and this was the first time he'd eaten Friday night dinner with us, and it was packed. So everyone was here, and cousins and grandmas and uncles, and I think he acquitted himself perfectly well. But for my part, it was about as perfect an evening as you could wish for, having all the family in one place, loudly jeering and chatting and laughing and screaming and giggling, and it was everything you could ever wish for. Last week also I had yahrzeit for my father, so 7th anniversary of his passing, so my brother and I said Kaddish, and that Friday night to have everyone all together would have been my father's absolute dream. Nothing he loved more than having everyone all in the same place. So obviously my sister wasn't here this time, she's back in London, but my brother and his kids, me and all my kids and their spouses and partners, and my mum, of course, and it was practically perfect in every way. Okie dokie, enough me, that's a lot of me. I want to talk about this article that was in The Guardian a couple of weeks ago, and I will link to it down below, but this is the name of the article, and I'll take you through it. It was called On the Road to Bridget Jones, so the book On the Road by Jack Kerouac to Bridget Jones, 5 books that define each generation. So I'm really loosey-goosey on the definitions of these generations, and then talk about the boomers, Generation X, Generation X, Millennials, and then Gen Y. Those are, I think, the 4 ages that it talks about here. And it lists 5 books that are important for each of these. As I say, I'm never really sure what I am. And this gives pretty good definitions. And according to their definition here, like the boomers, it's the post-war baby boom from people born between 1946 and 1964. Generation X is people born mid-60s to the early 80s, so that's me. I'm born in 69, about a month before man landed on the moon. Millennials, a cohort that came of age around the year 2000, so I guess it's people born, my kids, millennials, they're born 95, 96, 98, do they count as millennials? I don't know. And then Generation Y or Zoomers, I don't know, there's a whole bunch of names for who comes after that. Anyway, I'm going to take you through the books that it lists as the 5 books for each generation, and I'll come back to Generation X, which is now turns out that I'm part of Generation X, the 5 books it lists, and it was worryingly on the nose. So starting with the boomers, so the post-war generation, the 5 books it says that represent that, or 5 books that define each generation. It lists On the Road by Jack Kerouac, which I've read, Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, which is my white whale, and one day I guess I will read it. I read the first 50 pages or so many years ago and never got on with it, and never, when I wasn't a real reader, and I've never got back to it. Catch-22 is one of my white whales. The Female Eunuch by Germaine Greer, which I have read, is a fabulous book, and I gave it to my daughter-in-law and she read it, and was a very key text for my understanding of early understanding of what feminism and equality actually means. Then 2 books that I don't know. Knots by R.D. Laing. R.D. Laing is a famous psychologist or psychiatrist. Anyway, I don't know Knots by R.D. Laing. And then it talks about, and then the 5th book that defines the boom generation is Your Baby and Child by Penelope Leach, which I don't know. I mean, I don't think I've read it, but I don't even know if it was around one of the books that we were given when my son was born 25 years ago. I don't think so. It might have been one of the things, but it certainly wasn't a book for me, and didn't define my parenting in those early days. Anyway, those are the 5 books for the boom generation. I'm going to skip over Gen X and come back to it, because what's disturbing to me is that the 5 books for the millennials, because millennials are Gen Y according to this, the 5 books for the millennials, or the generation that comes after Gen X, I don't know any of these books. So The New Me, The New Me by Hallie Butler. Halle, Halle, Butler. I don't know this at all. A slim novel. Don't know that book. The Empathy Exams by Leslie Jameson. Never heard of that. I vaguely might have heard the name Halle Butler, but I've never heard of the Empathy Exams by Leslie Jameson, a 2014 essay collection. Don't know it. If anyone knows about it, if anyone out there, Jane Y, has read the Empathy Exams and lives by it, then I'd like to know. Severance by Lingmar. Now, I know of this book. I've seen it, and I didn't ever buy it or read it. So, but I've seen that book. The next two books, How Are You Going to Save Yourself by J.M. Holmes, a collection of linked short stories, follows 4 black men in Rhode Island. This is exactly the kind of thing I would have read if it had been on my radar, and I don't think I've ever heard of it. And then Kids These Days by Malcolm Harris, which is non-fiction, and don't know it at all. So it's claiming those 5 books. Let's do that again. The New Me, The Empathy Exams, Severance by Lingmar, How Are You Going to Save Yourself by J.M. Holmes, and Kids These Days by Malcolm Harris are the 5 books that define Gen Y millennials. Don't know. And then Gen Z, so the last generation, the next 5 books, only one of which I think I've even heard of and have never thought of reading. So These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. Don't know, a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, according to this. Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. I've seen those graphic novels, love story, YA, queer love story, I think, and I don't know them, haven't read them. Don't Call Me Crazy, edited by Kelly Jensen, anthology of essays on the topic of mental health. Don't know it, haven't read it. Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas, another YA adventure in which a trans boy from a traditional Latinx family accidentally raises the dead. Know nothing about this, never heard of it. Are you in Generation Z? Do you know this? Don't know. And then They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera, which is calling a TikTok sensation. Again, another book I'm totally unfamiliar with. So I'd read a couple of the books, and I knew of the books, most of the books in the Boomer generation. The 2 generations that come after me, completely missed. Now I want to take you through the 5 books. It says define Generation X. Okay. And it has pictures of the editions. Okay, number 1 is The Beach by Alex Garland. In this edition that I purchased in 1997, Alex Garland is almost an exact contemporary of mine, and I even bought his second novel after this, called The Tesseract, and then his third novel. No, second. I bought The Coma. I didn't read The Tesseract. Anyway, The Beach. The Beach is an absolutely seminal novel. About his year off, and as I say, Alex Garland is almost that contemporary of mine. It wasn't at my school, he was at UCS, University College School, which is also in northwest London, where my grandfather was actually a pupil many years before Alex Garland. So definitely that was a book I bought and read when it came out in paperback. This is new, this is my original paperback. The next one, it says, the second of the 5 books that define Generation X, Helen Fielding's Bridget Jones' Diary, which I read, bought December 97. Yep. The third book that it says defines the Gen X, No Logo by Naomi Klein, bought it, drank the Kool-Aid, read No Logo by Naomi Klein. The 4th book that it suggests defines Gen X is White Teeth by Zadie Smith, and it has a picture of this edition, which I bought when it came out in paperback. And the 5th book, which it says defines the Gen X generation, is Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. I don't have my copy here because I've already lent it to my son, who has it in his home, and so I passed it on to the next generation. So of the 5 books it says define Gen X, I clearly have been defined, and this article was kind of fun, and it talks a little bit about all the books, including several books that I don't know, and I've looked up, because I would love to be down with generations that come after mine. Clearly, though, I have had a pin stuck right on me, pinning me to the Gen X category. Okay, that's the end of that. Now I'm just going to take you through the books that I've read since I last did one of these. So, when last we met, I was reading Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu. I thought this was terrific. It's all written in that font, as makes it look like a screenplay. I think, I'm always up for books that take a swing at style on the same level as content, I don't even mind sometimes if there's style over content, if the style is there. But I like there to be some content, and there absolutely is here. The style, gets a little bit forced towards the end. The whole idea that the metaphor of the actor and the bit part player in his life, because the Chinese American is always a bit player in the story of America, and that's the what's being satirized here. I think it is eventually a bit overdone, the idea that this is all a screenplay, because it's not as important the actual story of this main protagonist's life and his father, and what he sacrifices in order to achieve what he thinks is the best he can achieve as a Chinese American bit player, trying to achieve the best role of Kung Fu man. I think that metaphor is stretched about as much. It will stretch almost to breaking point, but there is enough solid stuff here about self-loathing and the way people are othered by society, but then allow themselves to be othered. Now, that's not victim blaming. That is pointing to what society expects of us, that we internalize and actually take on ourselves. I'm not blaming the victim for creating this. I'm saying that occasionally the victims of these things are. It's not complicit. It's so ingrained and so part of society that we don't fight it, even when we can and should. And the lessons that our protagonist learns, and where he ends up at the end of the book, and his understanding of his role in life as a son and as a father and as an American, I think was solidly entertaining. I think that the jokes hit, the satire is pointed, and the conversation about race and racism and the internalized self-loathing of the other in society, and I relate to it as someone who's lived as a Jew in a predominantly non-Jewish country before moving to Israel. I don't want to appropriate anyone else's experience, but I think there are some comparisons, though clearly the Chinese American experience is unique and different simply because of the way Chinese Americans are treated to this day, and I think it's different to anti-black racism in America. It's certainly different to anti-Semitism or Islamophobia. Each one of them is its own thing, but this is, I think, I saw things in this book that I hadn't seen represented elsewhere, and I think it was funny first, entertaining second, but valuable and insightful and worth reading, as well as all those things. So enjoyed that a lot. Interior Chinatown, Charles Yu. It's won a couple of prizes, and I can see why. It's pleasing as well as valuable. After that, I did the latest in the series, this Scott Snyder series of Batman that I collected them all in hardback, and I'm working my way through them. This is 6 out of 10, I think, and I've got sort of a sidestep one as well. So it's nice to have them all in hardback, and I pick them all up, £6-7 each. This was not a linear part, so these I think were individual issues from the run. So occasionally we'll get one of these, and the 8 issues will tell a whole story, or maybe 2 4-issue stories, and this was little bits of standalone stories from throughout the run. So they're not all consecutive issues. For example, this is it collects issues 18 to 20, so that's 3 consecutive issues, and issue 28 and issue 34, and then Batman Annual number 2. So it dances around from the run, and I've got the rest of them there. But so this was a kind of bit of a pit stop in the whole run. Don't think it really advances the plot very much. Still very pretty to look at. I'm really liking Greg Capullo's artwork on here. There's some good stuff, some interesting characters. I don't know how much of this stayed in continuity after Snyder's run, but this was solid, fun. Another one, this is volume 6, Graveyard Shift. So after that, I started one of my new projects, and I read the first ever Maigret. This is by Georges Simoneau. This is Peter the Latvian. It's published. This is a very recent set of reissues from Penguin. So I think they've been freshly translated, and this time it's been published as Peter the Latvian, though it's been published in several other titles. The original French title, I think, is close to Peter the Latvian. I don't remember. 1 second. Maybe it says the original French title here. Pierre le Letton. Okay. This is translated by David Bellos, and that was not what I was expecting. In my head, I thought Maigret was going to be a sort of stuffy Miss Marple type character, sort of a pipe-smoking, sort of fuddy-duddy older gentleman. And this is 160 pages. Actually, the Maigret in this is a bit of a badass. You know, he's described it. He's brawny and he's strong. Yes, he's always got his hand. He's always drinking a beer and having a sandwich and smoking his pipe. But he's as tough as nails, and he's a hard man. At one point, he's shot, and the bullet goes through his shoulder, and he sort of ties himself up and staunches the bleeding, and he carries on going, and he's gritting his teeth through the pain and standing in the rain, staking out at the baddie. And the plot is like solidly noirish and dark, and the villains are evil, and it's convoluted, and there's some tropes here that are run right through classic noir, and as I say, I thought this was going to be a little more cozy, and was impressively badass. So really like that, and this is the first entry in my Simoneau Maigret project, and really pleased with this start. I wonder, so the next, I've got the second one of these already, and it's an old Penguin, a sort of green Penguin crime edition that was published in I guess the 40s, 50s. So I'm wondering whether that translation will be as sort of muscular as this one was, because this really was propulsive and exciting and impressive. So it's a great start, and makes me very optimistic about reading more. So I've got another one, and I'll read that before I order a couple more. But as I say, this is something that I'll do. I'll read if I enjoy that second one, and it keeps me wanting more. I'll pick these up 2 or 3 at a time over the next 20 years. And that's Maigret, and this is where it started. And when you're still checking into these videos in the year 2045, let's be conservative, I should be coming towards the end of this project. That was that. After that, I read a fantastic bit of non-fiction. Michael Lewis's The Premonition. Yeah, outstanding. If you read Michael Lewis, you've read Moneyball, or you read The Big Short, or the Sandra Bullock one. He's just always good value. He has the greatest way with an anecdote. He manages to find his way into a story through the personalities, and this is no exception. So The Premonition, it's a pandemic story. It's subtitled. This starts in the Bush administration, the second Bush administration, where somebody gives W a book about the pandemic of 1918, and he decides that the country needs to get ready in case anything like this happens again, and he sets wheels in motion to start planning pandemic preparation. Some of that carries over into the Obama administration, but by the time things get real in 2019, 2020, changes of administration have led to different focus and priorities. Now, this book is very heavy. I would say 2/3 to 3/4 of it predate the actual the pandemic that we all call the COVID-19 pandemic. It's all about everything that went before that, and people making predictions and modelling and having a real sense of what needed to be done should such a thing happen. We know now, and I don't think the story's over yet, but we know now that many of the things that people said probably would really help save lives were not implemented. This book is not. I've seen some places sort of market this as a book that is, going to is going to really sort of dump on the Trump administration, and it's not that book. because the problems did not originate with Trump or his administration. The problems are more deeply built into American society. There's a lot of trouble with the CDC and how they operated, and how financial considerations, not necessarily the CDC, but how the way business works and big pharma works, actually acted to prevent preparedness in the US. It's a fairly damning indictment of the United States healthcare and the healthcare industry, without being specifically, it's not pointing fingers at Trump, because this wasn't a Trump problem. This was an America problem. Some great characters in this book that I'm already starting to look into and find more about. In particular, a woman called Charity Dean, who I urge you to look up, and she's done some panels with Michael Lewis and spoken to him, and she's actually now started her own company called the Public Health Group, I believe, which is worth looking into, because it's really interesting what she's trying to do there and try and change the way America addresses health issues. But there are some other great characters in here as well. A guy called Carter Mesher, Mecher, another guy called Joe DeRisi. This is Lewis's absolute talent, is telling stories through people, finding the people who had something to say, were not afraid to say it, may have been ignored, but eventually their smarts and their ability to really put their finger on a problem demands attention. Great reading. Maybe this book is coming out 2-3 years before it could really get the whole story. As I say, the first 3/4 of it is everything before the pandemic. Then when we get into the pandemic, it sort of rushes through the whole thing and then ends quite abruptly, partly because I don't think the story's ended yet, so it just sort of wraps it up and maybe had a deadline. But there's more to come. Certainly more. We're going to be hearing the name of Charity Dean for many years to come, because I think she's going to make a significant difference in American healthcare. And based on this, she's the right person to be doing it. So, Premonition, a pandemic story, really good if you like non-fiction, if you like reading about what's going on now, if you like Michael Lewis, really good. And then the next thing I read after that was another Hellboy. So this is actually number 2 in these Hellboy releases, and this is called Wake the Devil. So Mike Mignola, I don't know how you pronounce his name. I've never bothered to look it up. Sorry, Mike. He writes and draws these, and this is early Hellboy still, so we actually find out what these things on his head, which I remember when I first saw Hellboy, I thought they were goggles that he was putting on his forehead, but we find out a bit about his origin. There's a bit more Rasputin here, a few more occult Nazis, all that juicy good stuff, all with Mignola's weird blocky art, which you either like or you don't like, and I happen to like it. A side point about Mignola, I'm going to just go with Mignola because I don't know any better. If you ever saw one of the lost Disney movies of the last 20 years, was called Atlantis, the Lost Continent, I believe. A great Disney animation. This is not Pixar, this was full Disney, although it was probably computer drawn, not hand drawn. I think Michael J. Fox voiced the main character Milo, and it's about the search for Atlantis. And all the art design in that movie, which I've seen the movie a number of times because it came out, I think, I have it on DVD or video. I think it was DVD. I think it was one of the early DVDs I got, one of the first handful of DVDs. So when we first got a DVD player, we had Atlantis, and the kids watched it over and over. And because my kids were at the age, so that was one of the movies that we got, that and The Emperor's New Groove. Disney films that no one remembers anymore. Anyway, those are the movies that my kids grew up with. Atlantis, all the production design and the art design in the movie Atlantis was by Mike Mignola. So there's something about his blocky, squarish fingers and things which was translated really well in that movie. It's very stylized, but actually interesting. And the book that I'm currently reading, so I finished Hellboy, love that. I've got loads more of those to do. And the book I'm currently reading, let me just get that, so pause. I didn't pause, I stopped. Anyway, the book that I'm currently reading is this. It's The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi. So just started this, and I'll get through this weekend. Looking forward to this so far. This is in Nigeria, right? And Akwaeke Emezi is a non-binary Nigerian author, I believe. Blurbed on the back by No Violet Bulawayo, who wrote the book of shortlisted We Need New Names, and Daisy Johnson, who wrote the book of shortlisted Everything Under... don't know. Anyway, look forward to that. Got lots more to read this weekend. It's lots of time. God bless. Speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.